Today is April 2, 2017. My name is Fatima Valdivia, and I'm interviewing Elia Gonzales for the Voces Oral History Project in Brownsville, Texas. Thank you, Elia. First, I want to confirm that you understand the interview will be hosted at the Neroli Benson Latin American Collection. If there is something you don't want to talk about, you don't have to. If there is something you want to talk about in addition to the interview question, please let me know. So can you please give me a short overview about your life as it relates to the change that come about as part of the South Texas Border Initiative?
A review of my life, you said? That's a good question. As a result, see, that's a tricky question. I guess having attended college away from home gave me insight to some of the opportunities that were available at the time for people from my generation or my age group. And then having completed my education, I wanted to return to my roots, so to speak, and share what I had learned. And so I decided to return to the Rio Grande Valley and get into the teaching profession. And then later on, I was fortunate enough to work with a project that helped students from high school prepare for college. And that was kind of like the peak of my contribution, I guess, to continuing education after high school.
How do you persona identify, like Mexican American, Latina American?
Probably Mexican American. Yeah.
So how was your life growing up in a Mexican American family living in Rio Grande Valley?
At that time, as a child, to me, it was normal and typical. But now as an adult and looking back, you know, I can see how it wasn't, how it was different from others. Because my mother stayed at home and raised us, we led a very sheltered life. So in that sense, growing up in the Mexican American family at that time was traditional. However, because my father was self-employed and had a profession, he was a barber, we were exposed to a lot of things that other families were not. For example, my father really promoted education, and that helped us all, my siblings and I, in the long run, because education came first. Whereas in other families, Mexican American families, working came first to provide food on the table. And the family would have to migrate to find employment to survive. And my family, myself and my siblings, we never had to migrate because my father had a profession. Even though it wasn't, you know, a well-paid profession, you know, like he wasn't an attorney or a doctor, but he was self-employed and we didn't have to migrate like other families did.
And why education was important for your parents?
I think because my father had served in the military and participated in World War II, and he had served in the military forces in Europe. And I think he gained an awareness of how important education was and maybe how it affected, and from his perspective, social status, I guess, or rank in the military. And I think he came back with the idea that it was really important to stress education for his children.
And how these ideas affect your decision to go to the university?
Well, I think it affected a lot because we were always encouraged to do our best in school, academically perform the best we could, and because, again, we were fortunate enough to stay in one place and not have to migrate. We never had to miss out on school like other students who had to leave early or come in late because of migration, because they were migrant students and they had to work. So we were very successfully, we were very successful academically, and that instilled in us a value for education. So therefore, we saw continuing education after high school as a necessity. Like, you know, it wasn't even a question. It was like, when and where are you going to continue?
So what other people or events influenced your decision to pursue a university degree?
This is really interesting. When I was attending high school, even though the Mexican Americans were a large number of the population in this area, the students in leadership positions were not Mexican American, right? And we still had a lot of faculty, a lot of teachers and staff that were not Mexican American. So I would say that it wasn't stressed to continue education among the Mexican American students. And what influenced me to continue and to pursue education was that by chance I happened to work as a student aide at the counseling department with the counselors. And in the counselor's office, they had all this information about attending college, which was primarily targeted for the top students who were primarily non-Hispanic, non-Mexican American. So because I worked there, I would find myself looking at information that was available that I didn't know about. And I got encouraged to continue education and to acquire a career. And I think that was the turning point for me. And the fact that, again, my parents really stress the importance of education and continuing education. But I think that awareness that came from working in that environment is what really motivated me and encouraged me to continue.
And did you see this access to information was different for Anglo students?
I would say so, because I think that I remember the counselor singling out people and saying, oh, well, college isn't for you. You should go to vocational school, And I think because most of the leaders in the school, the student leaders, were, I'm going to say, non-minority, they were the ones that got catered to as far as the presentation of information, the sharing of information about attending college after high school.
And what other kinds of disparities did you see between Anglo and Mexican American students?
I think at that time, and it was an example of the times. I think it was that the expectations were not the same for Anglo-American students and Mexican-American students. And it could be based on history, historical, a historical process. So therefore, if the expectations weren't there, then there wasn't a necessity to provide information all across, in equal form.
And how this situation could affect the relationship between the students?
I don't think it really affected it because it was expected. Like I said, the expectation wasn't there. And I have since talked, like when we have class reunions, I have since talked to others, and they will say that, yeah, it never occurred to me to continue education. The counselor never gave me information. I was told that I could do this instead, like go into being an auto mechanic, auto body, hairdresser, those other vocational careers which did not require college education. So I think that it didn't cause a conflict because it was expected. No one knew otherwise. It wasn't really, we weren't aware, is the point, because the information wasn't disseminated equally.
Did you have a bilingual education in Rio Grande Valley? Bilingual?
That's an interesting question. A bilingual education in the sense of being taught formally in the schools, bilingually, no. But since Spanish was my first language, I learned it at home, and we spoke Spanish at home, and therefore learned English in schools. I didn't learn English till I was in the first grade. So therefore, I grew up bilingually, but speaking Spanish at home and speaking English in school.
And this was not a problem for you? Don't speak Spanish in your school?
I don't think it was a problem. I don't know if it was for other students, but I guess it wasn't a problem because I was successful at learning in English and speaking in English, so it wasn't really a problem.
So wasn't it difficult to learn English for you?
At the beginning it was. At the beginning it was, but as any child, you quickly learn. Plus, I think at home it was encouraged that we learned the language, that we learned the English, because I remember my father saying that we had to learn the English so that we could achieve success as we grew older in society.
But you could speak Spanish in your house?
Oh yeah, we spoke Spanish in the house. Yeah, my father was bilingual. He spoke English and Spanish. My mother was not. She only spoke Spanish.
So how was your relationship with Anglo students during elementary and high school?
Elementary, I attended an elementary school that was in the neighborhood, so the majority of the students were Spanish speakers or Mexican Americans. There were very few Anglo-American or English-speaking only students in the elementary school, so that wasn't an issue for me. In middle school, as in most middle schools, you kind of tend to stay with a little group, with a little clique. So I didn't have a problem interacting with others. There were a little bit more Anglo-American students in middle school than there had been in elementary. But it was in high school where you could really see the difference, because that's when all the schools came together. Mm-hmm. So you saw more. But I never had an issue interacting with them. As a matter of fact, because of my success academically in school, I interacted a lot with the school leaders, and that also encouraged me to, I guess, gain confidence and motivated me to continue going on to school after high school. I was active in school. I was part of organizations like student council. I was officer, in different organizations. So I interacted a lot with non-Mexican American students, but there was never a problem. It wasn't an issue.
Okay. And how was your relationship with Mexican American students? Was like similar?
Oh, it was the same. Yeah, it wasn't a problem. It was the same. I can say most of my friends were Mexican Americans, and I think we all spoke Spanish because I was considered first generation. Because my mother spoke only Spanish, I was active in a lot of activities for first generation students, such as like the Spanish Club. So I was actively involved in that as well. But I would say most of my friends were in the same situation. We were Mexican Americans and spoke Spanish and English.
And how was your relationship with the professor in elementary and middle school?
With the teachers in school, I never had a problem because I was a good student. Again, grew up with my mom at home, so we were used to being very obedient. So therefore, we weren't a problem in school. We did what we were told to do. So there wasn't ever a problem with the teachers. And since I was quick at learning the English, I understood the English-speaking teachers, because we had, at that time in elementary, I would say maybe I only had 2 teachers that spoke Spanish. The other ones were all English speakers. So I was able to get along well with them. And again, because I was a good student, I never got in trouble, so I never had problems.
And did you meet any other child who have problems with English in the school?
Let me think. I think in elementary, because it was hard to make that transition from coming from a Spanish-speaking home into the English-only language classes. Yeah, there were some students, and I think I saw them more again in middle school, because again, the elementary school was a neighborhood school, so we all knew each other from first grade, and we hung around together. When we went to the middle school, that was when we were integrated with other students from other schools. And yes, there was an English-speaking school where the majority of the Anglo-American students lived. So that, integrating that was kind of challenging, but we stuck with our own. So for some of those students that didn't speak the English, that could have been a problem. But I can't recall a specific situation that I can tell you about.
But how about the professor? How they manage this kind of challenge with the language?
That's a good question. I think, you were expected to be at a specific level. So even in the elementary school where you were taught the English, I guess those students who were more successful would work with a specific teacher, and those who were struggling would work with a separate teacher. So I guess they would get separated. So they wasn't all integrated like it is today. You had your high achievers, your middle achievers, and then your low achievers classes. So since I was a high achiever, I interacted differently than those that probably had more struggles.
Okay. So why did you decide to go to UT Austin?
Good question, and I've been thinking about that since this was coming, because my children asked me the same thing. I think it was because going back to my experience in high school where I was a counselor aide in the counselor's office, I would hear people talk about it, how great of a school it was. And I think the top leaders in the school had been accepted and were going there. So it was, to me, it was like a top-notch school, very prestigious. And my father loved sports. He loved football, and he was a Longhorn fan. So I remember telling him, Dad, I'm going to go to that school. And he kind of like, yeah, right, I don't think you'll get to go. That's impossible. But I think it was, I don't want to say peer pressure, because there wasn't a pressure from the peers, but knowing that top students from my graduating class were going to go there, that was something that I wanted to do too. I guess I wanted to prove to myself that I could attend, that I was just as good as they were. I don't know. I haven't really, pinpointed that. But I know that I was influenced by what I would hear and see at the counselor's office, and that's where I wanted to go.
And why did your father think that was impossible to access to UT Austin?
Because it was a very prestigious school. And let's face it, back in the day, it was primarily white. It wasn't ethnically diverse yet. And I remember, and I've shared this with other people, when I graduated, I attended here in Brownsville 2 years, And that goes back to what this project is about, that in Brownsville, you could only attend 2 years. It was a 2-year college. The closest thing would be if you went to Edinburgh, but even then, it was very limited to what you could study, primarily education. And then you could go to Kingsville and primarily do education or music. It was very limited to what was being offered. But after I went 2 years here in Brownsville, and then I went on and finished at UT, and then I decided to go back and continue studying. I remember coming, I happened to be home, and I went to go vote absentee. And in those days, the people at the polls, the people that help you, I can't remember their title, but they're the people that take care of the ballots and monitor the election process and so forth. Of course, they were all Anglo-Americans, because those are the people that lived in the area that were in leadership positions. So I remember that it was mainly elderly people, because they're the ones that were retired and could sit there all day at the election booth waiting and helping people to vote. And so this one older lady asked me, "So why are you voting absentee? Why can't you come the day of the election?" She was kind of, snobbish about it. And I said, "Oh, well, because I'm going to college." And she's like, "You are?" And I said, "Yes." She goes, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to UT in Austin." "Where?" I said, "UT in Austin." "In Austin?" I said, "Yes." And she says, "You mean they allow Mexicans to go there now?" And I was like, "Yes, ma'am." I'm thinking, I guess so if I'm going there. I said, "Yes, ma'am." And that was the first realization that I had where I noticed disparity, where I noticed that I was different. Because up until that point, I hadn't noticed, because again, I was a high achiever. And I had never noticed that it was a Mexican-American thing or an Anglo-American thing. It was just, I just felt if you work hard and you achieve, you can do it, you can continue. But that was like, wow, I can't believe she said that. And then I thought, well, yeah, I can see why.
And how did you feel because of that?
I was surprised, I could tell you, because I had never noticed that. I had never really seen it like UT at Austin was only for Anglo-American students. Because I had been accepted, I was going there, so I thought it was okay. It was equal opportunity. But there were still a lot of people at that time that probably were surprised, that did not agree with it, with that going on. And again, this was an older lady. I would say she was like in her 70s maybe. So you think about where she came from, her history. Of course it was shocking to her.
And what about your parents? What they think that you go to UT Austin finally?
Oh, they were very proud, especially my father. They were very proud that I was able to get in and to succeed, to do well. But also attending the university, was still a challenge, because even though diversity was finally being promoted, there was still a lot of racism on campus.
Do you remember any experience in particular?
I remember a couple of things, one personally, but other things that would happen to other people. But I know that in one of the classes, I was like the only colored person there, and even though I wasn't necessarily treated differently, I wasn't ever recognized, I guess. I was just like one of the other students. But then I remember also feeling discriminated against in my department, in my classes. And it wasn't so much because of the color of my skin, but because of my ethnic background. And because in the department, that I studied in was the Spanish-Portuguese department. So the people of color that attended were students from other countries, from Latin America and from Spain. So I could count that there were only 5 Mexican Americans in my department that were studying Spanish and Portuguese. All the others were Anglo-Americans or people from other countries. And that's where I felt the discrimination. It was like I wasn't good enough to be studying in that department. You had to be a renowned person in another country to be able to attend the university, or you had to be an Anglo-American.
And why did you decide to major in Spanish?
I think it was because, one, I felt comfortable because that was my first language, that was my native language. I think also because at the time when I was attending high school and I was studying Spanish, I was encouraged or motivated by my teachers to study that language, and I saw a need. The teacher that was teaching the language in high school was already elderly, and I kept thinking, you know, who's going to take over when she's not here? It's like, you know, who's going to teach the classes, you know, the non-Spanish speakers, you know. So I felt like there was a need to have representation, I guess, in the school. Again, even at that time, like I mentioned, the majority of the teachers, this was in the 70s, the majority of the teachers were non-minority. They were Anglo-Americans. So I felt like I needed to give back, I needed to represent. And I loved the language, you know, and that was my first language. So I think it was a combination of things, but primarily because I felt comfortable and I felt like there was a need to represent, to teach the language, because if not, who was going to do it, kind of thing.
And how was your relationship with Anglo students during UT Austin formation?
That's a good question, because I had very few. Because it was barely being integrated, we kind of stuck together. We, meaning the students of color. And I mean, there were few Mexican Americans or Latin American students, but there were even fewer African American students. Okay, so at that time, late 70s, the term that was used on campus was Chicano. And I remember that we would hang out together, and they would have, you know how they have at the Texas Union, they have the different committees. And I know now it's a lot more inclusive. But back then it was designated. So there was an African American culture and a Chicano culture committee. And the Chicano culture would host a Chicano night. And that's when we would meet other Chicanos who were on campus, which again were not a lot. So we would kind of stick together. In the classroom, again, it was rare if there was another Mexican American student in the class. You might have been the only one. I mean, I was the only one. So you just had to get to know the other person sitting next to you, develop some kind of relationship, conversation first and then relationship. And it was okay, but it wasn't close. I mean, it was just the minimal, I guess, communication at the time. In the dorms, the same way. I happened to select a roommate from this area, so I got lucky that I had a roommate from this area. And then we kind of got together with other students from the Rio Grande Valley in the dorm, in the hall that we used to live with. So that's who we really hung out. And then, sure, there were a couple of other students that were not from the Rio Grande Valley that we would get along with. And I remember some, and they were really nice people. And I don't think I've ever had a problem with anyone or having an altercation or anything like that with anyone. You know, everyone, the student body seemed to be nice, at least the ones that I interacted with in the dorm and in the classroom.
And at that time, did you feel identification with Chicano identity?
At that time, I think so, because there wasn't really another option, in that, like I said, the organization was called Chicanos, and you either joined the Chicanos or you had to fight for yourself in mainstream, which was, Anglo-American America. So I guess at that time, yes, I would identify.
And now?
And now I think not, because having studied and learned more about the Chicano movement, where it stemmed from in California, I've spoken to people who were part of the movement. It's not the same. It's different from what I envisioned, what I thought. So I identify more with Mexican American because I'm from Mexican descent, but U.S. born American, as far as from the real definition or the original definition by the Chicano movement in California.
And what are the differences that you see between the identities?
Well, the Chicano movement stems from the premise or realization that the Mexican American culture, and I say Mexican American again, from Mexico, living in the U.S., came from an area, specific area in Mexico. And I don't think that's necessarily true. So that's why I don't agree with that. Plus also, Chicano movement has a stigma of being more radical. And again, maybe it was okay where it started, but I know that Mexican Americans in California are different from Mexican Americans in Texas. And I think that's one of the differences there from where the movement started in California, that it was hard to continue it throughout the Southwest.
So the relationship with Anglo student and international student was only in the school, nor outside the school?
Where, in college?
In UT.
In
yes,
college?
in UT.
No, it was outside.
Mm-hmm.
It was outside because, again, we tended to stick together. But then we had the international students, right, which were not the same because their experience is different. So no, I would say I was pretty diverse in my acquaintances, in my friends, in my activities. Because I was studying Spanish and I chose to study Latin America history, so I would attend a lot of Latin America events. So I got to know Natalie Benson facilities very well because I did research there. And so I interacted with a lot of other students from other countries, Latinos, because they were from Latin American countries. So no, we would have activities, we would go to events, we would study together, we would go out, party together. So it was also outside of the classroom, not just in the classroom. But I have to say, I can't think of a specific individual Anglo-American student that I really got close to. It was either a Mexican American or it was Latino or Chicano, but it was not Anglo-American at UT.
So, and how was your relationship with professor in UT Austin, like a Mexican American student?
With the professors, they were pretty good. I don't think I ever had a problem. Like I said, my undergraduate was done in the Spanish and Portuguese department. I didn't have a problem with any of the students there. I mean, any of the professors there. The other courses also, if I had a question, I learned that you have to go talk to the professor, you have to go to office hours, and once you figure out how to get through the system and work with the system, then you're okay. So I didn't really have an issue with professors, an encounter with any of the professors. The experiences that I had were very positive. The classes that I had, I really enjoyed. I learned a lot. So I don't think I had any bad relationship with them. I just learned that you have to go to class, you have to go see them for office hours, and you got to do your work to be able to succeed.
So when you talk about discrimination, because there are Mexican American students, you refer like the system, like number of students in the department?
Not so much. I see the way, for example, the way we were. How can I put it? I can't say treated because it wasn't really like, that's the way you have to do it. It was just the environment. It was kind of subtle. Applying for assistantships, TA-ships as a graduate student, you had to have a lot of experience and qualifications to achieve the position. In order to have that experience, you need to have that contact or connection with the professors. You need to, I guess, get to know the professor at a different level. And it was a little bit more challenging for me to do that than other people who were older, more experienced, more experienced in that they had been out in the field. Like say, maybe it was a journalist who had been working in DF, and here they were, getting a PhD, or somebody, I know there was an author from Chile who came back to get a PhD, so it was very competitive. And it's like me from the Rio Grande Valley, with a little bachelor's competing at this level of position with all these other people. So again, it wasn't so much a discrimination of the color of skin, but discrimination of age, ethnicity. I don't know. It was just different.
Mm-hmm. And how this ethnicity affect the relation?
Of the students or
yes,
the professor?
Yes, about this process in the university.
Well, I think the relationship. Well, I guess, we still learn to work together and attend the class, but for me, I felt like I had to really work twice as hard to participate because I didn't have the experience that others did. So I had to really work hard to have information, to keep up with what was going on, current events, to be in the know what was happening in other countries, so that I was be able to participate in communication and discussion in the class, outside of the class, with the professors. So that was different. But as far as individuals, I think there were cliques. There were cliques. Like there were the kind of, it reminded me of going back to high school. The people that are teacher's pet kind of thing. The students that are teacher's pet with the professors, the students who are low achievers and have to work really hard, and those that are just kind of getting by. So it was mainly, who do you know to be successful? Who do you know? Who's on your dissertation committee? Who's on your thesis committee? Who's going to read your dissertation? That gave you status in the department. And so you really had to work hard. So people who would tell me, oh, you're a Spanish major. Well, that's easy because you speak Spanish. It's like, no, it's not. You speak English, right? Okay. Well, what if you got a graduate degree in English? Is it going to be easy? Well, no. Okay, well, that's the same way. It's not easy just because I know the language. You have to do all the coursework.
And how did moving to Austin affect your life?
It was eye-opening experience. It was shocking. I had never been to Austin, and that's why my parents didn't think I was going to go, because it's like, you've never been out of the valley. Really, we had never been out of the valley. I think the furthest we had gone to would maybe Corpus Christi, but we had never been out of the valley. And they were like, "How are you going to go?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm gonna find a way." And my friends thought, "Oh, you're not going to go because you're the oldest, you're a female, they're not going to let you go, your dad's going to want you to stay home, blah, blah, blah. But no, he said, fine, if you think you can do it, go for it. So I signed up for orientation. I took a flight. I booked a flight, and I don't know where I got the money, I don't remember. But I booked a flight. I landed in Austin. At the time, the Austin airport was downtown, remember, off MLK. So I got off the plane, got my bags, asked about getting a cab, and they said, oh, there's a bus that goes over there. Just go stand over there, and da-da-da. Okay, so I went and got the bus. So sure enough, there was a bus that went just straight down on MLK, and it dropped me off right in front of the stadium. So I was like, okay, great. Okay, this is your stop. So I got off with my suitcase, and I'm like, okay, where am I going to go? I mean, where's Jester, So this was in the 70s. And I mean, the city was still small. It wasn't huge like it is now. The campus was, confined to the 40 acres. So I get off and I start walking, and I can't go through the stadium. I have to go around the stadium. So I'm going around the stadium, and I know I must have looked totally lost, because this young man comes up to me, and he was a Spanish speaker, Latino, because we were the same color, and he comes over to me and he says, do you need help? And I'm like, no. He says, well, do you know where you're going? I said, yes, a Jester. He goes, do you know where it is? I said, no. He goes, well, let me help you. So he walked me around the stadium, down to 21st onto Jester. And that's how I made it to Jester. But that was the first time I had ever been to Austin. I had ever been to the university. So after those 3 days of orientation, you go back home, and then came back. And again, everything was totally new. I mean, just the fact that there's so many students on campus, that at that time, 80% of them are white. Walking on Guadalupe, and you see all these punk people with colored hair. I had never seen that. They didn't have as many homeless, but there were a lot of, unusual characters. I was just like, wow, wow, wow. I was just totally surprised. But then I was like, okay, why are you here? And so that was what was focused for me. It's like, I'm here to finish my degree program and go back home. That's what I'm going to do. I don't want any distractions. I don't want to, get involved. Just get here and come here and do what you have to do and just get out. So I was changed because, it opened a whole new world for me. It opened, the opportunity to live with people that were different from me. I mean, everybody that I grew up, like I told you, they were all the same color. We were from the same neighborhood. We were childhood friends that went through the 12 years of school and never did anything else. So then it was other people from other places. And that opened up, a whole new world. Plus the information that was being taught at the level that it was being taught. Like I said, you had to work really hard, as you all do now. It's not the same as it was in high school, and it's not the same even attending here for the 2 years. The majority of the faculty and staff here were of the same color. And the students that you saw in your classroom were probably students that went to school with you or a year before or a year after. So they were familiar faces, but over there it was totally new. And so it opened up, a whole new world. It gave me experience, it gave me confidence, and I learned a lot. I really learned. I mean, the exposure to the information that's being taught. So that totally changed. It totally changed. So when I was given the opportunity to continue, I grabbed the chance. I said, yay, I want to continue. I want to do more. There's so much more that can be done that we could do. So it was definitely a great experience.
And how will being woman affect this process?
I mentioned the first one, that I thought it was going to be difficult leaving home. But luckily, I had my father's blessing to do that. I guess the majority of the people that went up to UT with me, we were females. There were about 10 of us that transferred from Brownsville up there. And we were not all from San Benito, but a majority of us were. And so we were all female. So it wasn't really, I didn't see an issue with that. As far as in the classroom, I think it was equally diverse between males and females. So I didn't see that affect me in the classroom or even outside the classroom. I think the effect that I saw was within my family, coming back, because coming back and it's a rude awakening, like, oh my gosh, I just moved back 20 years, come back and it's like, nothing has changed, everything's the same, people still the same, they think the same. And not my immediate family, but my extended family, they were like, well, she went to college, so she thinks she knows it all, she has her nose up in the air because she got a degree, she went to UT, blah, 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 who does she think she is, That was where I saw an effect, And so I had to remind myself that, that's the way people are, and adjust again to living in the Rio Grande Valley, and then of course I came back and I started teaching. So that helped because I was in the education realm, right? I was protected. I wasn't like in a career that would be, I don't know, an architectural career or nursing or something where you're among other professionals. It was in the classroom, so we had similar experiences, the teachers I'm talking about. But still, I don't know if it was my attitude or my, what's it called? I was very naive. I don't know, but I know that walking into the classroom as a classroom teacher, and sharing ideas or providing ideas and volunteering for activities and things, I know that it turned off some people, especially those that had been teaching for a long time. They were like, well, who does she think she is? She just got her degree, she doesn't know anything. And I know that I threatened people, because that's what one teacher told me. She goes, well, when you walk in the room, people feel threatened. And I'm like, why? Because you think you know it all. And I'm like, I never said that. But it's because I had all these ideas, remember? I was exposed. So I had all these ideas of how to improve, how to, make things better, how to do things differently. And people don't like to change, especially people that have been teaching in the classroom for years. They don't want to change. They're happy. So I decided, I think I'm going to go back and continue my education, because I don't want to work in this position for a long time. So my plan was get you 3 years teaching experience, go back, get a PhD, come back as an administrator, superintendent, so that I could really implement change. Because change from the ground up is harder to do than change from the top down.
Why do you think that?
Because when you're in the group, when you're at the same level with other people, it's harder to implement change, because the other people, they might be in a similar position as you are, but they're not at the same level of change. Whereas if you are an administrator, then you can delegate and you can probably implement change a little bit easier or quicker than you would otherwise.
And so what happens with your friends that didn't go to UT Austin?
That's a good question. One of my best friends ended up going with me to UT, and she's become very successful. She got her bachelor's and moved to Houston and worked. She got her bachelor's in math. She wanted to do engineering, but she changed to math. And she did very well in Houston working with big oil companies, with Shell Oil. So she's doing really well. The others, one of them stayed here and went to school. And I don't know if they finished where they finished, but one of them became a classroom teacher and she was teaching. And then 2 other ones never continued. One of them ended up getting married and having children, and the other one got married, had children, and She was working as a secretary in some law office, and another one was working as secretary in another firm. So they were able to find employment, but they didn't pursue a career. And probably because they didn't have the support from family, I have to say. That's really, really important. If you don't have the family support to further your education, it's going to be really challenging for you to do it on your own.
And you think this was because this perspective about Mexican American people here?
You know what? I think so. They weren't encouraged. They weren't encouraged. And remember that it starts from the bottom. You know, the younger the child is. As soon as a child is able to comprehend and you start instilling values in them, then they can build on that. So again, for me, it was my parents saying, education is important. You need to finish high school. And education, and you know, my father would, in that age, and my sister and I talk about it, in that age, which Mexican American family subscribes to Reader Digest? We did. We had an encyclopedia in our home. I mean, that was unheard of. But my father, he really promoted it. He himself was an avid reader. And he had taught himself. He had gone to Barber College and taught himself. So he really believed in that. Whereas my friends, they didn't have that. I remember I mentioned some of them were migrant students. You know, they probably didn't even have a textbook. Couldn't afford it. So that makes a big difference. So I think because my friends didn't have the support at home going to school, elementary, middle school, and high school, they weren't as successful academically. So therefore, they weren't academically prepared to go on to college. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So the ones that continued were those that had the family support, that were academically prepared, that took the right classes. And that's the other thing, that you had the tracks. Which way are you going to go? Vocational school, college bound, whatever. And so I happened to stick to the college bound track, and I was able to get prepared.
So what difference did you perceive as a student between UT Austin and Brownsville high school and other kind of schools?
Okay, I kind of mentioned that. Attending the 2-year program at Texas Southmost College here in Brownsville, it was challenging, but it wasn't as challenging as UT. And I mentioned the professors, they were from this area, they were the same color skin, most of them spoke Spanish, and the students were similar students you had seen in high school, so it was still kind of a continuation of high school. It wasn't, I mean, yes, the classes were challenging, but not as challenging. When you get to UT, you have the different cultures, and it wasn't as diverse as it is now, but you have the different cultures that you have to acclimate to, and the expectations are higher. I talked about the department, and the coursework is harder. So you can't compare, and even to this day, I tell students, you know, yes, they have excellent schools here, excellent programs, excellent professors, but the experience is not the same if you go to a local university or if you go up north.
And what about the resource, the economical resource?
Well, the resources, as far as the opportunities here at the campus, were not the same. I mean, they had a library, it was a major library, but nothing comparable to the, how many are there? 46 libraries that UT has? I don't know the number. I mean, nothing compared to that. I mean, that was what was in awe for me when I was doing graduate study and studying specific authors, and you go see their documents, and you see an actual document from 1919, and you get to look at it. I mean, you might not be able to touch it because it's behind the glass, but you can actually look at an author's original piece of work. To me, that's awesome, not compared to something here that you read in a book and yet you see the picture, but you actually see the portrait. You know, that's more impressive or eye-opening or awesome. So the resources were definitely different. Financially, of course, going here locally is less expensive than going away, especially to UT Austin. But I have to say that because of my parents' financial situation, I was able to get financial aid. And that's what allowed me to go to UT. Because I was able to get financial aid to attend the 2 years here. But then I also applied and received a scholarship to transfer to UT. So that's what allowed me to go to UT. So otherwise, if I hadn't had the financial support from the college here, I would not have been able to go because I didn't have the economic resources to go. So even though I wanted to go and I qualified to go, I'll get accepted, the financial resources were what allowed me to go.
So why do you think is the reason for these discrepancies between the system, educational system in UT Austin and Brownsville or Grand Valley?
Economic resources. Economic resources, because they're one of the reasons why you're doing this project. Because this area never had the economic resources. The only four-year institution they had was in Edinburgh, but even so, it was very limited to the number of degrees that it could offer because they didn't have the resources. And they didn't have the resources to hire faculty to teach the classes, to provide the classrooms. You know, there's a lot of cost in maintaining a university, and the resources weren't there. So I think that since that lawsuit, you know, things have slowly improved, but slowly, okay, because they're finally getting some assistance, but they're not there yet. But it has to do with financial resources, because that's what moves things, what, you know, brings the faculty in and is able to provide the courses, the classrooms, that the classroom facilities and the courses that are being offered to the students.
So talking about the South Texas initiative, what do you know about this initiative?
I'm not sure, I don't know very much because I don't remember. But I remember attending a meeting, I want to say back in 2011. It was held at UT, at that time was Pan American in Edinburgh. And I remember they gathered a large group of educational professionals, and including the president of the university, the president of the current university over here, the college in Dr. Reed, the college in McAllen, and educators throughout. And we came together to exchange ideas about improving education in the region, about, we set goals that could be achieved. We had a goal of, you know, in 10 years, where do we want to be? In 20 years, where do we want to be? In 50 years, where do we want to be? And to increase the level of education here in this area, but also the opportunities that did not exist at the time. And a lot has changed. I mean, like the South Texas College in McAllen, I mean, they didn't exist till a couple of years ago, or more than a couple of years ago. But, you know, things have changed. But more needs to be done because it's a very large area, and it's a highly populated area of people that need to continue education. So I don't know if there's any other information that I can remember right now, because it's been a while.
Did you participate in other activity?
Besides that meeting?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember participating. Again, I'm not very familiar with it, and it's been a while. But my last position before I retired was as a program director for a program called University Outreach. And in that role, I attended numerous meetings regarding higher education. I was in the initial committee for writing the grant that brought the first GERA program to the region. I was a member of a council regarding improving migrant education. So there were other projects or opportunities, I guess, to share and discuss ideas and information. But you know, I have to really go back in my memory to try to remember those.
So, what was, from your perspective, the role of the student into the initiative?
Into the initiative of the South Texas Project? Again, I don't remember much, and maybe I should have researched it. But from my understanding was that the project was to help the student continue education, continue to promote higher education for the student to continue. I don't know, is that sound right?
But do you remember students participating in these meetings or no?
You know, that's a good point. When I attended, no. There were primarily administrators and people in the community involved in project. But at that point, there wasn't student input. I don't know if later they had a meeting for the students. I would think they probably had some kind of meeting for the students on that campus to bring ideas or raise concerns. But I don't recall attending a meeting where the students were involved. That's a good point.
And do you think if the student participate into this meeting could be different, dynamic, or?
I think yes, of course it will be different because there are student perspectives that need to be brought in. As administrators, we have ideas and expectations that the students may not be able to meet for good reason. And if we don't know what those reasons are, then we're not going to be able to implement our goals. So I think it's important for the students to be involved, and it would add a different perspective to the project. But like I said, I don't remember, or I don't know if they had an opportunity. I would assume so, but I don't know.
Do you remember if was any problem or misunderstanding into this organization, into this meeting, for example, like different position between administrators?
I think that overall, the project was well accepted, and I think overall, I would say 100% of the people were in agreement, so I don't think there was an issue there. I think the issue was in implementing the plan, the term. Is it going to take, can we do this in 10 years? Is it going to take longer than 10 years? And I think some of the concerns that were voiced had to do with the level of academically preparedness that the students were at the time. Because I remember concerns being shared by the community college professors or administrators about the level of students that were entering at their college. And then that transition from the 2-year college to the 4-year college in Edinburgh, and the concerns that they had. And the concerns were the students are not well prepared. So it goes back to the K through 12 people to prepare the students. And so the K through 12 people are saying, well, we're trying to prepare them. I mean, we have these courses, available for them. And we offer this and we do this. And so, it's like when you talk about education in Texas, everybody points the finger at somebody else. And no one really takes responsibility for their position, for their action. So I think that was the issue more of, can we achieve these goals in this amount of time? Not that they weren't supportive and it wasn't a good idea. Everybody agreed that it needed to be done.
So what do you think, in your opinion, what were the main achievements of the initiative?
I think what we got to achieve, and I have to say that there were meetings after that I did not attend, because this was in 2010 and I retired in 2012. So, I mean, this was in 2011 and I retired in 2012. So I know there were other issues, I mean, other meetings after that. But I think at least we were able to come together in agreement as a cohort, and we set some ground rules or some goals that could be looked at for other people to continue to follow up and see if they were realistic, and then later to implement. So I think it was a good start, a good groundbreaking, a good first meeting. But we had a long way to go. I mean, we had just started.
So, what advice do you have for current generation working in advocacy on behalf of issues that affect Latinos people?
Read it again. That's a long question.
Yes. What advice do you have for
Advice.
this generation, like are advocating for?
Right. I think that you can't stop. You have to continue because there's a lot to be done. Yes, we've made some strides. Yes, there have been some improvements, but there's a long way to go. And you have to continue, and there are new issues that come up that were not looked at before, that did not exist before. And you can't give up because it needs to be done. You know, it needs to be done. There's so much more that can be done. There's still a lot of work to do.
Did you see any particular impact that this initiative provoked in the region, in this area?
Let me think. I think so. I think that by coming together and bringing out, setting some goals and then discussing or sharing some issues, I think that impacted some people, like some of the school districts, to make some changes, to make improvements. Even some of the other projects that have gone on, like Europe, has made an impact. Because I think the first step to change is awareness. And some of these programs like Europe have made a big impact on awareness. And then coming together as a group, again, it's an awareness. And when we share and we discuss information that not everybody knows, we become aware of other issues, like the four-year institution saying, well, the two-year institution is not preparing, the two-year institution saying, well, K through 12 is not preparing, and then sharing the issues that are involved. So that higher ed says, oh, okay, well, maybe they're not prepared because of what's going on in K through 12. Or K through 12 can say, I need to prepare because higher ed is going to require this. So I think it was successful in that information was shared and an awareness was created that we all need to work together, the educational system, we all need to work together, because otherwise we're never going to be in sync. If higher ed's over here like, well, this is higher ed, you know, we don't care about K through 12, well, then K through 12 is not going to have the kids prepared to get into higher ed. And in higher ed, I mean, K through 12 needs to know this is what higher ed is demanding. And if we don't get the kids ready, they're not going to continue. And that wasn't happening before. There was no communication. So I'm not saying it's a lot better because I really don't know, but it was a start. It was a good start.
And what were some of the goals that you talk about in this meeting?
I think it had to do with numbers, like increasing the percentage of high school graduation, decreasing the dropout rate in K through 12. Okay, it had to do in improving test scores for college entry exams. What else? Well, and then the academically preparedness of the student, like having them better prepared in which the state has mandated. You know, stronger in math, stronger in writing, so that they can achieve success in the classroom in higher education. I think it was also the number of the going rate of students going to college after high school. it had to increase. I can't remember numbers, but I want to say it was low, like 40%, and the goal was to bring it up to 70%. I'm making numbers up. This is not, but something like that, to increase the going rate of students going from high school to college.
Okay. So when and why did you decide to go back to Grand Valley after you stay in UT Austin?
Oh, to come back to the Valley,
Mhm.
that's a good question. Um, because I became a mom. I got married and had children, and it was really challenging to continue my professional career and handle a marriage and raise two kids, especially in Austin, where it's a fast-paced city, and you have to go, 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 go. And it was really taking a toll on me. It was draining me, and I was not happy. So I told my husband, I want to go back to the Valley so that I can raise my kids in the Valley. And he was like, what? And I said, yes, because I don't like the environment here. I don't want to raise my children here. And we were both bilingual, but we were primarily using English because of our positions, because of our jobs. So we were speaking English primarily. And I said, I want my children to learn to speak Spanish. And if we go back, we might be able, it might be easier for us to use Spanish at home and have them learn the Spanish. So we decided that we were going to try to relocate, and we both applied for jobs, and it was whoever gets a job first will move down and set up camp, get an apartment or whatever to rent, and then bring the rest of the family. So he ended up getting a job first, so he moved down, and then 3 months later, I moved down with my two kids. So that's when we moved back, because I wanted to raise my kids here.
And how was your professional experience in Grand Valley?
Actually, it was really good because I was very fortunate. It took me a year to find a job. And so we made ends meet because of the standard of living not being as high as it is in Austin. We could afford to survive on one income. So we managed. It was a struggle. After that, it took about, I guess, nine or 10 months. And this position became available with this program called University Outreach. And it was sponsored by UT at Austin. So with my resume and my experience with UT, I was very fortunate to get that position and continue working with the university. So I began working as an assistant director, and then eventually I became the director of the program. So I was very fortunate in that sense. And then I quickly, like I said, assimilated with the environment, because I knew the people here, so it facilitated me to get into the schools, to get into the community, because I was from here. And so that helped me a lot to implement the program and initiate, because I had to really initiate the program from the top, from the bottom up.
And what difference did you see in the education process when you stay like a professional in this outreach center, and in comparison with your experience with you was a student here in Grand Valley? The system was similar or different?
I think it was different. It was definitely different. It had improved. It was better. And I think it was, I received a lot of support, because I think as a whole, the educational community wanted to see change. So they were very supportive. But it had definitely improved. The expectations had changed. They were a little bit higher. They were a little bit more they were closer to being on the equal level. I didn't see the disparity of the courses that were offered to all the students. I did see a difference. You know, time had changed, and it had changed for the better.
And the access of the information was better.
Yes, yes, it was better, and I think it had to do with the change in the administration, the faculty and staff. There were more people of Mexican American descent, more people of color in the classroom, in administration, and I think that made a difference to providing equal access to the students. So I did see a difference.
And why do you think is the reason for this change?
I don't know. I was thinking about that as I was talking to you. I was thinking about that. I don't know if some of the lawsuits made a difference. I know that it was due to the change with the education agency. You know, TEA made changes. Coordinating board made changes. So I know there were changes that came from this governing bodies, but I don't know if it was the result from some of these lawsuits that were made.
So what was your relationship to the Spanish language growing in the Rio Grande Valley?
My relationship? Well, that was my first language. You know, I grew up speaking Spanish at home. So I guess there was a time where I felt more comfortable using the Spanish language.
And then change, or?
I think, no, it hasn't changed. It's just, it depends on where you're at. It depends on your environment, because when I first attended UT the first 2 years as an undergrad, I primarily spoke English, and I had to become well versed in English to be able to succeed there in that environment. So even though I knew Spanish, I didn't use it as much. Even among my friends, or say my roommates in the dorm, we primarily spoke English because we had to acclimate to the environment. And we would speak Spanish, but you know, word here or there, but not really. But when I went to graduate school and I got exposed to other cultures from Latin America, then I went back to my Spanish roots, and I would use a lot more Spanish with the students, with my classmates in the classroom and outside of the classroom. So I used a lot more Spanish then. Coming back here in the classroom teaching setting, I had to use more English because I had to be a role model classroom teacher for the kids, encourage them to learn the English, because there were a lot of still Spanish speakers only in the classroom. This was in the 80s, late 80s. And so I had to use the Spanish a little bit more than I had used it before. Okay? And then when I got into the position as the university outreach, I had to use some Spanish to talk with the parents, to communicate with the parents, to help the parents understand. So I would use some of the Spanish. So it just depends on the setting that I'm at and the experience that I have. How can I put it? The longer I use the language, the more comfortable I feel in it. So if I have the opportunity to be in a Spanish-speaking environment, then I will use the Spanish language.
So what does it mean for you to be a bilingual person?
What does it mean? I think it's great. It gives me great value to speak to languages, and I wish everyone would speak to languages. It doesn't have to be Spanish and English. It can be French and English, German and English, you know, anything. But you become more valuable as an individual the more languages you speak. You know, you're worth more because you can communicate with more people.
So you say that you can advise, give this advice for the current generation to be bilingual.
Yes, you have to learn another language. You have to, because English is not enough. You know, you won't be able to communicate. You won't be able to communicate to as many people, even though English has become the worldwide language. You still need to have another language.
So do you speak Spanish with your siblings in your house?
That's a good question. I don't speak a lot of Spanish with my family anymore. We don't see each other often, but once a year at the holidays. But my generation grew up being encouraged to speak English, to be able to assimilate into the American society, to be able to succeed. So we were pushed, promoted to speak English more than Spanish at home. I mean, we remember the Spanish because we used to speak it at home, especially me, for some families that are second generation that spoke English at home, they've lost the Spanish. So with my siblings, we can use the Spanish, but we prefer to use the English. It just feels more comfortable now.
Because this assimilation, or
I think so. I think so. Because of the assimilation.
and what about your siblings? They want to learn more Spanish, or they are
No, they're more of English speakers.
okay?
I think I'm the one that uses Spanish most from them, and I don't use a lot of Spanish. Now, I use a lot of Spanish speaking with people who are older than me that might also speak English, but they prefer to speak Spanish, so I use Spanish with them. I use, like, my neighbors. I have elderly neighbors. I will probably speak Spanish with them. Or people in my church community, they prefer the Spanish, so I will speak Spanish. Or if there's someone who does speak English, of course, I'll speak Spanish. But I would say of my siblings, I'm the one that uses Spanish more than they do.
And why this is happening? Because I think it's common. If you can recognize the Spanish is important, or it's important to be bilingual person. Why is it happening in your family? Is not improve the Spanish language?
I think it's because, like you said, assimilation, and at the time, it wasn't promoted to retain the Spanish language. Okay. And I think it's also the environment. I think there are areas in the Rio Grande Valley where Spanish is spoken more than English, and then there are areas where there's more English speaking going on. And it depends where you live and who you interact with. So I see it in the school system today. The recent immigrants continue to speak their language. And even though they have learned the English, they prefer to use the Spanish. I think it's a sign of the times where, importance is given to being bilingual. Whereas when I grew up, it wasn't that important.
So why is it important that your siblings go to the school now?
That my siblings go where?
To the school.
Go to the school.
Yes, that continue the education, go to university. Why is this important for you?
To my siblings?
Yes.
I don't understand the question.
So, because you say that for your parents was really important to go to school.
Right.
And now, why is important for you that your siblings go to school?
Okay. Are you talking about my siblings or my children?
Your children. Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I was getting confused.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think for the same reason. I think it's important. First of all, I think that everyone should continue learning, no matter what level you're at. No matter, let's say you don't have a 4-year degree, but you have a 1-year certificate or a 2-year degree program. You shouldn't stop there. You should continue learning, because life changes, and so you need to continue. Things are new each and every day. There's new information out there that you need to learn. So, whether you have a degree or not, even in your job position, you need to keep learning. So I think that's important. As far as higher education, I think it's important because it helps you become a professional and have a career. And what I tell students is that there's a difference between a job and a career. A job is something you do just to make money. It can be anything, wash cars, serve hamburgers. A career is something that you're passionate about, that you want to invest your time and energy to make things better. And that's the whole point. You should have a career to make things better. So in order to have a career, you need to have an education. And you need to keep learning. So I think, for my children, I think it's important for them to get an education, because that will allow them to not so much have financial success or financial security, but they will be able to make a difference with an education.
So what does it mean that your daughter, for example, Ceci, is attending to UT Austin? What do you think about this? What are your advice for Cecilia?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm very proud that she's attending. And her brother attended also. And I think it's important because despite the changes that have occurred and the increase in opportunities in this area, and the resources that have improved, UT at Austin still offers many more opportunities that might not occur here. So I encourage them all, I have 4 children, for them to continue studying and to get out of this area to experience something different, to experience more. So I'm very proud of them, very proud of Ceci that she's attending the university, and she's doing well. But I just wanted her to get more opportunity and a different experience by living outside this area, and doing, so she can learn what it is that she wants to do, because there's so much more opportunity there.
And how do you think a student in a border school could affect your siblings now?
Students in the border or
Yes,
schools in the border?
This area.
I don't understand. How do you think the students in this area will affect?
Could be affect their development in the professional career or something.
What do you? I don't understand. What will affect them?
Yes, could be a good impact, or could be more challenge for have been studying in Rio Grande Valley before to go to UT Austin.
Okay, so are you asking me, do I think that the students should study in this area before going?
No, how was a student here? Is this positive, or could be more difficult at this moment?
To go to school here?
Yes.
I don't think it's difficult. I think the students in this area are very fortunate because they have so many more opportunities that I had, years ago, like 50 years ago, because they have so many options that were not here before. And so they have the option of studying for 1 year, studying 2 years, studying for 4 years, or studying 6 years. That option was not here before. And so, and there's such a diverse of opportunities in the careers that they can study, in the majors they can study. So I think it's positive. And I think that the majority of the students could possibly continue higher education if they really wanted to. But there's quite a few that choose not to.
So did you tell me at the beginning that your family was really traditional, like a Mexican family? How is it like? How was to growing up into a Mexican family here?
The traditional?
Yes.
How was it traditional?
Mm-hmm.
Well, only my father worked, and he did not allow my mother to work. She had to stay home and take care of the children. So therefore, we always had a parent at home. They instilled values in us. My mother was always there to raise us. We weren't able to go anywhere without permission. We only had one car, and my father used it, so we couldn't go anywhere. My mother cooked all the meals My mother would sew our clothes. We hardly ever bought things. She made everything. What else? We lived next door to my grandparents. We had family all around us. We had an aunt across the street, another aunt next to her, a cousin next to her. You know, it was like a block of all family. We all lived together. We visited family every Sunday, go to everybody's house kind of thing. So I think in that sense, it was very traditional. That we had a lot of customs that that we would practice with our family.
And how you could broke this tradition, because you are now working and be mother.
Well, I think the main reason, the main difference is that I was a working mother. You know, I didn't stay at home with my children. But as far as the other values, I think I've tried to keep them. And as far as traditions also and customs, you know, it's harder because time has changed and society has changed. And oh my gosh, electronics, the internet, social media, that has changed. I mean, that's, you know, battling against tradition and values and morals. So, you know, it's, you have to change with the times and try to maintain a balance with tradition, values, and morals, which is quite a challenge. But I think as a mother, as a working mother, the challenge was not being there for the children 100% of the time, but I was there quite a bit of the time, and we kept things traditional. I mean, we did things together as a family all of the time, all of the time. We would go to the grocery store, we would all go to the grocery store. Everybody in the food cart, we all go. Nobody stayed in the car, nobody stayed behind. So I still did that.
And what part of this Mexican tradition are important for you now?
What part of the Mexican traditions?
Uh-huh.
I think family is really important. I teach my children that family comes first. I think we try to maintain some of the customs, you know, from our culture. I try to instill in them things that that I used to do as a child or as in growing up. So I try to do that. So I would say family, traditions. I think I can't think of anything else right now.
What kind of tradition do you reproduce here?
Well, one that we were doing, we didn't do it this year, but one we were doing was my sister who lives in Austin, she comes down, and so does my brother, and we would get together and make tamales for Christmas. Okay. My sister still makes capirotada during the Lenten season. I don't make it anymore because nobody likes it, and I don't want to eat it all by myself. We still make the nopales. We cook nopales. So some of the traditional foods, you know, we do that. What else? I can't think of anything else right now.
And the new generation are reproducing these things, or you think they are losing?
I think they're losing it. I mean, if we wouldn't force them to make tamales, they would choose not to. You know, so I get my kids and my niece and nephew, and they come together and they have to make the masa, and it's like, do we have to do this? And my sister goes, well, only if you want to eat them when they're cooked. If you don't help make them, then you can't eat tamales. And they're like, oh. So I think, you know, I don't know, once we're gone, is anybody going to do it? Maybe not.
But it's important for you that this kind
I
of
think
thing-
it's important. I think it's important that at least they're aware of it. You know, they need to be aware of their ancestors and their culture and their family traditions. I think it's important that they maintain them.
Okay.
It'll be hard though, because back in the day, things were difficult to do. I mean, everything was made by hand. None of this buy the tortilla at H-E-B stuff, you know, everything was, and so it takes time. And when I cook and I tell them, and they're like, man, it takes so long, I don't think, I'll just go buy it. You know, so it's a challenge.
And you maintain relation with people in Mexico, or all your families here?
All my family is here. My father was born here. My mother was born in Mexico, but most of her siblings migrated to Texas, so they all moved here. So I don't have family members in Mexico, and if there are, they're very distant relatives. So.
So, finally, there are a lot of questionnaire. Why did you accept to be interviewed for this project?
I thought it would be interesting, and I thought if I could provide some information or some insight to help, I wanted to do that. I wanted to share stories or information with others.
So, do you have any other comments or points that you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I just think it's good that you're doing this. It's important, and I hope that it continues to be done, because we need to keep a record of things.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
And for your words.
You're welcome.